And what happened at ARAB's sentencing was a tragedy. The judge, before he announces the sentence, says, "Young man, you've been sitting in my courtroom listening to the statements of the victims, listening to the prosecutor discuss your crimes, and the entire time you've had your hands folded like this. And the entire time you've been dismissive and jeering and snickering and scoffing. You don't look contrite. You don't look like you respect this process. I have the ability here today to give you a range of sentences. It could be anywhere from, here to 45. And what I'm going to do, based in part on your behavior in this courtroom today, I'm giving you the max."
Yo, how is that even legal?
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Man, welcome back to another episode of the Ruling Class Podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Diddy, back up in this witch with another video. Listen, if you're new to the show, please know your boy's thirsty to grow and to drink some of this water. You can help me out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. But don't worry, I'm going to give you a sec to do that. Help me out just a little bit. Hit that like button for me. I appreciate you. Listen, I'm not going to waste too much of your time. A lot of you out there know that I have a master's degree in public service. And in the process of getting this master's degree, I studied just a little bit of law. And I worked at a law firm for almost 2 years, right? But the type of law that I studied, or I was underneath, if you will, at this law firm, or I was working within at this law firm, is called fair housing. Because as you know, there are many different types of law in this world, right? Let alone this country. All right. So specifically what we're going to talk about today, I don't really know how this works or how this is even legal. So if any of my subscribers, if any of you study law, or you know someone who studies law that can answer this question for me, I would greatly appreciate it. Because again, I don't know how this is even legal, and judges get away with doing these sorts of things. So I stumbled across this video on social media earlier where Vlad was talking to this guy, and they were having a conversation about just what it's like in the courtroom and some things that have happened. And they brought this guy up named AR-Ab. AR-Ab is a popular rapper, street guy from the Philadelphia area. And I only know who he is because he's affiliated with Meek Mill and the rapper Cassidy, and Drake even mentioned him in a song one time. But anyways, this guy was sentenced in 2019. So it was a few years ago. He was sentenced for running a drug ring that had some murders, connected to it. So he put himself in this situation. Let's be clear. He put himself in this situation, and he's the reason he was there, and he deserved jail time for this. So I am not this. That's not what this video is about. But I want you all to take a listen, because the way that he was sentenced, the amount of time that he ended up getting for being one of the head guys for running this ring is ludicrous to me. It's crazy to me that it even comes down to just something so simple like this, right? Because what a lot of people don't know is that when you go to court, regardless of what it's for, you are allowed to give testimony sometimes so that the judge can be lenient on you, hoping that the judge will be lenient on you, or you have people come in and give testimonies about your character. This happens all the time in the courtroom. Well, I want you all to take a listen as they talk about AR-Ab and how he ended up being sentenced to 45 years and what caused him to be sentenced for 45 years. But let's take a listen.
You really at a disadvantage with them. You can't beat them. Right? It's like they got to say so what happened with your life. That's crazy, because they regular people. We're the gods and shit. It should be people that's way more I don't feel like another human should have access to somebody's life like that. Another human just be like, oh, I'm gonna give you life. Yeah. I don't feel like that's right. I feel like it should be, I don't know. I feel like it should be people under the president or some shit like that, really serious, important people. But it's just so much. That'd be hard for it to happen, though.
Well, yeah. I mean, the best example of that was my man AR-Ab, who I was very cool with. I remember I was talking about this case with my man Mo Gangat. He's a lawyer that comes in and kind of breaks down cases for us and so forth. And during the sentencing, AR-Ab's sentencing, the judge said, oh, I see how you're giving me dirty looks, and I see the scowl on your face, and blah, blah. 45 years.
So let me just say, earlier 600 Breezy mentioned how he felt like human beings shouldn't have the power to just, hand over life sentences to just anyone that they want. Now, while I agree to him to an extent, because I know where he's coming from, I do believe that we do need a system in place. We do need a legal system in place to keep order, right? And I think that that's even, set in place by the, God Almighty, laws and things, laws of the land. We do have to follow that, and unfortunately, us as humans, we're flawed, so we have to follow those sorts of things. So that's not even quite my problem. I do agree with him, but to an extent. I still think that we need a law, and there are going to be humans that's running those laws, right? But Vlad mentioned something. He said that ARL was in the courtroom, and the judge mentioned that, hey, I see the scowl and the bad look that you're giving me in this courtroom, 45 years. Now, let's be clear. ARL was going to be facing a lot of years anyways, but I believe that was like an additional 15, 20 years or something crazy like that, all based on how the judge felt about this man's facial expression. Is that not crazy? Now, let's be clear. The judge wasn't the reason ARL was in that courtroom, but the judge played a role on the amount of time that this man is going to be serving. So let's be clear. I'm going to tell you all a situation before, because I really want you all to hear what the lawyer is about to say, but I want you all to hear this crazy story that I experienced a couple of years ago. I wasn't facing criminal charges or jail time, but it's on a smaller scale, but it still goes to show not only my character and how far I will go to try to get an answer to something, which almost got me in trouble, but I want you all to see just how much the judge themselves play a role in what happens in the courtroom. So I'm trying to make this fast. About a couple of years ago, I get a speeding ticket. I've been driving for about 8 or 9 years, and in 8 or 9 years, I've probably gotten I think that was like my third speeding ticket, right? And so every time I get a speeding ticket, I think that's how I get caught for expired registration, because I always forget to get my registration at the top of the year. So I get pulled over for speeding. They notice that my tags are expired, so I typically get 2 tickets in one. So every year, what a lot of people don't know, if you don't know this out here, I'm going to give you this game, because a lot of people, for some reason, don't know this. But when you get a ticket, a lot of people like to go ahead and pay it off and get it out the way. You really should never do that. Even if you have the money, never do that. You're supposed to go in the courtroom, because not only will your fine be reduced, but that's your way of speaking to the judge, and they'll keep certain things off your record, right? So it's always good to go to the court and get face-to-face with the judge. Anyway, so I already know how this goes. I've been to court like 3 times before, 2 or 3 times before, for a speeding ticket. All right, so I go in the courtroom, and they're doing something different this day. They typically go by last names, and my last name starts with the J, so I typically don't have to wait too long. But this particular day, they said first come, first serve. So when you show up, they give you a ticket. So the judge was going to go by numbers. So I ended up being like number 44, right? So I watched this judge go through 43 people, and the judge basically did what I've seen judges do every single time I've come to court before, which is they're very nice. Even if they're not the nicest judge, they're lenient. And a lot of that is not even because they want to be nice to people, because yes, they don't have to do it, but they do it, from my understanding, talking to a friend of mine who's into law, is because they have, the city a lot of times have so much fines build up, because people can't pay those fines, because when people get pulled over, the city is making money from that, right? When they're giving people tickets, that's one of the ways that the city makes money. A lot of times people go without paying those fines, so they feel like they'll get their money if they reduce the fines, right? So anyways, I'm in court. I watch him go through 43 people, and he did exactly what I've seen done every time I go in the courtroom before, which is they're lenient, right? If you take care of whatever you need to take care in between the time that you got pulled over by the officer and got your ticket and the time that you come to court, if you do what you're supposed to do in between that time, then they typically take care of you, right? Let me tell you what happened, though. So I watched him go through 43 people, and he was taking $1,000 fines, cutting it down to $200, taking $300 fines, cutting it down to $100. Like, he's really reducing people's fines, right? He's just making sure, hey, do you have a clean record? Have you been doing what you're supposed to be doing in between that time? Okay, you check off this, you check off this. All right, cool. I'll reduce this, send them to the back. They'll set you up for a payment plan if you can't pay it in full today. So I'm number 44. I'm like the second to third person, last person in line. So I get up, I go up there. He calls my name. He looks over my paperwork. He was like, okay, I see you got pulled over for doing a 45 and a 35. Or you have, expired tags. You got a ticket for that. He said, Mr. Jordan, did you take care of your tags? Did you get that taken care of? I said, I got that taken care of. I like, yes, Your Honor, I got that taken care of the very next morning. So it was taken care of. I handed the police officer the paperwork to prove that. The judge looked at it. He said, all right, so you just have this $375 speeding ticket. So we're going to go ahead. He was like, did you have to pay any late fees for your registration? I was like, I believe so. I'm not sure. I don't remember. So they look at my registration card that I had with me that day in court, and they looked at the receipt, and they were able to see, okay, they charged you an $11 fee. So he looked at it for like 2 seconds. I mean, barely gave him any time. And I can tell just looking at the judge that he was tired. He went through 43 people. And if you've never been to court for tickets and things of that sort, the judge sometimes can spend 10 minutes with one person. So imagine how tired he was by the time he got to me. And I was number 44, right? He was like, all right, go ahead and give him credit for the fee that he charged. He made some markings on my card. And he was like, next person. And so I was standing, I was a little bit confused. I went with it. I went to the back to talk to the clerks where they send you to set up your payment plan or whatever, or if you want to pay in full. I go in the back, and I wasn't quite understanding my paperwork, so I said, wait, so is he reducing my fine any? I know he doesn't have to. I don't want to sound, privileged or entitled to anything, but I'm confused. Like, I did everything I was supposed to do in between the time, and I watched what he did for 43 people before me. And so when I got in there and I spoke to the clerks, that's what I asked them. And so they looked at my paperwork and they was like, oh, well, Demetrius, this is a little bit weird. I've never seen this before. So all he did was reduce it. All this judge did was reduce my $375 fine by $11. He gave me credit for the fee that I paid on my registration tag. So I was a little bit confused because, again, the judge don't have to do anything, but this is what he's been doing all day. So I was just asking, like, what was different with me? I have a clean driving record. I was confused. And I almost see that as equivalent to going to a restaurant, your waiter or your server doing an incredible job and you tipping them 50 cents. One could say, well, at least they gave you something. At least they tipped you something. You don't understand. It's better to not tip anything than to tip someone 25 cents, 50 cents, because that can be deemed as disrespect. That can be deemed as you telling them, I think you did such a terrible job that I'm going to barely give you anything. Maybe if you don't give them anything at all, it's because you didn't have anything to give. But if you give them a quarter, literally a quarter, that can be deemed as disrespect. So it's better to not give anything at all. That's how I see that. It's like, why did you even $11 on an almost $400 ticket? I didn't understand that. So the clerks were, all of them, she got up, went and asked other clerks. None of them understood. They was like, yeah, that is a little bit strange. I wonder if the judge actually saw your ticket, because I'm surprised he didn't knock your ticket down another $100, $125 or something. So they said, actually, Demetrius, what I would recommend you do is talk to the DA. Go next door, talk to the district attorney and see what she thinks. So I get up, I go next door, I speak to I go to the front counter, ask for the district attorney. She comes to the front counter and she frowned at it and she was like, that's very strange. I don't know why he would do that either, Demetrius. That does look weird. She said, here, this is what I'm going to do for you. She goes to the back, comes back with a car, and she said, hey, I know this is strange. I don't think he saw your I don't think he actually looked at your ticket in its totality, in its entirety. So come back in the morning. If you're free to, come back in the morning. I'm going to talk to him beforehand, and we're going to see if we can get this knocked down another $100, maybe $150, because this is typically what we do. This is what we practice in the courtroom. And I was like, thank you. I really appreciate it. I know I'm not owed anything. I was just curious. I'm fine with paying what it is. I leave out of the courtroom. This lady who was sitting in the lobby followed up behind me at the building. She said, excuse me, sir. And I turned around and I was like, yes. I didn't know who she was. And I was like, yes. She said, hey, I couldn't help but to overhear your conversation with the district attorney in there. And let me just tell you, for almost every day of my life for the last 10 years, I've worked side by side with a judge. And I'm going to tell you something that nobody's going to ever tell you. She said it blew my mind how many of the cases and the decisions that were made was simply based on how the judge felt that day. And I was like, what do you mean? She said if the wife and kids upset the judge that morning, then that could change somebody's sentencing. It can change the way that how much somebody was paying, and if the judge, it was all based on how the judge felt. She's like, and I work in this field, Demetrius, and I can tell you, I don't know how this has ever been legal. And I'm staring at this woman because I don't know why she's telling me this, and I was like, all right, well, thank you so much for that. What's your name? And she was like, I'm not going to give you my name, but I just wanted to share that with you. I don't know if it did anything for you, but just keep that in mind going forward, because it could be a lot worse. Because if you was facing jail time, it could have went a lot worse. That blew my mind. So the very next morning, I show up to court. Right, I'm waiting to see the judge, and the district attorney comes in, and I see her peeking with me. She's talking to one of the officers. She has her back to me. The officer glances over at me once. He waited a few seconds, glanced over at me again. I was like, I think they're talking about me. And then before you knew it, sure enough, the district attorney goes to the back, right where the same direction the judge typically comes from before he comes out. And then she came out like 5 minutes later. She sat in her seat, got up, played it off, and then came straight to me. And I pretended like I didn't see her coming, and she comes over and she said, Demetrius? And I was like, oh, hey. She said, listen, I'm so sorry, but I actually just spoke to the judge. And unfortunately, he said that if you're in his courtroom because you're upset that he didn't do something that you felt like you were supposed to get, as if you were owed something, then he's going to make your life a lot worse if you decide to speak to him today. And I frowned and I was like, but I'm not going to be disrespectful. I was just wondering why he didn't a different practice for me than everybody else. And she was like, I understand what you're saying, but he told me that if you decide to go up there and speak to him today, that it's not going to go the way that you think it's going to go. In fact, it's going to go pretty bad. And I just sat there in disbelief for a while. She said, it's your call. You're free to do whatever you want. But my advice would be just leave it alone. And I sat there and I was like, it's just that simple? Like the judge can just say that? And she was like, I really don't know another alternative. And I just left and I went home. Anyways, keep that in mind.
Because I don't know if you know what happened at that sentencing, but he pled guilty, right? He's got that plea in. Now he's getting sentenced. Sentencing is about 10 minutes of your life, maybe a half hour. If it's a long sentencing hearing, it's going to be 1 hour. It's 1 hour of your life at the most. And what happened at ARAB's sentencing was a tragedy. The judge, before he announces the sentence, says, young man, you've been sitting in my courtroom listening to the statements of the victims, listening to the prosecutor discuss your crimes, and the entire time you've had your hands folded like this. And the entire time you've been dismissive and jeering and snickering and scoffing. You don't look contrite. You don't look like you respect this process. I have the ability here today to give you a range of sentences. It could be anywhere from, here to 45. And what I'm going to do, based in part on your behavior in this courtroom today, in this sentencing hearing, which is a couple minutes, Vlad, a couple minutes in your life, a drop in the bucket. Based on your behavior here today, I'm giving you the max.
The max of 45 years. Now, let me be clear. I'm going to say this again. It's A.R. Al's fault that he was there. He put himself there. He deserved to go to jail. But for a judge to be able to make a difference in 20 years, 15 years, something ridiculous amount of time like that, I can see if you're like just erratic and you're violent. But because you're not giving them the best attitude or you don't look the happiest in the courtroom, they can make a decision so vast about your life. I'm just curious, how is this even legal? Now I understand if judges make, which they do all the time, if they make decisions based on how they feel to give someone less time or to give someone a less fine, which has happened for me before in the past, I'll admit that, of course, then you probably wouldn't hear from people like me. But I am wondering, where is it in the law where a judge, how can a man have that much power? How can a woman in that position have that much power? I'm just curious. How does that work at all, right? If any of you know the answer to that, I would love to know, because I'm not thinking I'm special and I'm the only one that's ever questioned this, but I don't know anybody else that would have went that far in the courtroom to try to get the answer to that question. It almost got me in trouble, but I'm like, how is it that you're able to do that, right? I can tell that I believe that the judge decided not to cut my time down because he was just ready to go home. He was tired. He was fatigued, right? I could tell looking at him. When he got to the high 30s, I was like, he looks so tired. I really hope this man is still looking at the paperwork and being lenient by the time he get to me. He wasn't. Again, it was just $375. It wasn't that big of a deal. But this man faced 45 years when he probably could have did 30. He probably could have did less than 30, right? It was that big of a difference, right? He could have been doing 20, 25 years. Right? Y'all up in the comment section, please give me your feedback. What do you think about the court system? What do you think about our legal system? What do you think about judges having that sort of power just simply based on their mood? Right? Until next time, yo. Peace.
Oh, yeah. Diddy got a podcast.